Okay, good day everybody, and welcome to New Energy Updates webinar, the status of Africa's wind and solar markets, by the wind and solar program leaders Javier Relancio and Mark Wright at Mott MacDonald. So my name is Adam Minkley. As you may know me already, I'm the organizer of the Africa New Energy Conference and Expo, which is to be held on May the 7th and the 8th in Cape Town. This webinar is one of several pieces of work we're doing in conjunction with the Africa New Energy Conference to promote the wind and solar industry in Africa and the opportunities that exist within it. So the conference itself will bring together hundreds of wind and solar executives to unlock development potential in Africa and also explore opportunities for reducing costs and increasing efficiency across solar PV, CSP and wind energy projects. So we're excited to have confirmed speakers at the conference from Abengoa, Biotherm Energy, Aqua Power, NL Green Power, Malilo Energy Partners, Mott MacDonald and many more. They'll all be giving presentations about the following themes. They are how to structure bankable projects, unlocking private power purchase agreements in new markets, IPP grid connection solutions, opportunities beyond the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Program, also known as REAP, and CSP, PV and wind case studies about project development strategies and optimization of existing assets. So we'd like to welcome you all to attend the conference, so please check out the event website at newenergyupdate.com/Africa. So moving on to the webinar, we have around 500 of you signed up today, so thank you very much for the great response and thank you in advance to our panelists. The webinar will last for approximately 30 minutes and it is being recorded, so we will send you the full audio recordings and presentations in the next couple of days. Javier and Mark will be co-presenting today's presentation. I want to bring your attention to the chat box on your screen. If you have any questions for Javier and Mark, please type them in the box and they will try and answer your questions at the end of the webinar session. So I'll now hand you over to Javier Relancio and Mark Wright of Mott MacDonald, who will lead today's webinar presentation. So over to you, Javier and Mark. You can now start your presentation.
Hi, everybody. Thanks very much, Adam, for the kind introductions. We also hope that the New Energy Update is a very successful event, and Mott MacDonald will definitely be there. And we hope to see most of the people from the industry and have the opportunity to catch up with most of them about the exciting markets in Sub-Saharan Africa. Our presentation will focus in some of these markets. As a disclaimer, we would like to state that obviously we don't have all the information from every other market. So this is our attempt to give an update on what is going on in the continent. And again, we are also focusing in a number of countries which we consider that are quite active. And this doesn't mean that there isn't other projects in other countries that are also happening, but we could be speaking about Africa for hours and hours. So that's the purpose of the presentation, is just giving an overall summary of what is going on. I am here with Mark Wright, who is the wind program leader for Africa, as you have introduced him. And this is Javier Relancio speaking. I am the solar program leader also for Africa. And we will obviously remain at the availability for every other person in the audience that has any questions at the end of the presentation, or our email addresses are also at the end of the presentation, and please feel free to send us any email. This being said, I'm jumping directly into the presentation. We are going to start with giving a quick introduction to Mott MacDonald. We need to do it. We will try to keep it brief. Then we will speak a little bit about the overall existing IPP programs and initiatives, and we will then jump on to each of the markets in Africa that we have identified for this presentation. When about Mott MacDonald, it's one of the world's largest engineering firms. We are at around 17,000 staff worldwide. We are employee-owned, and we have a presence in most countries in the world, including around 900 staff in Africa. You can there see the staff per country. As you can see, our footprint in the continent is quite extensive. And when we deal with our projects, it tends to be a combination between people in country and our renewable energy experts. We don't have hubs for renewable energy in each of the offices, but we do collaborate with them quite extensively depending on the project needs. We are basically active in every other type of or form of energy, including most renewable energies, as you can see in the present slide. And very importantly so, we also have an environmental and social team, geotechnical capabilities, grid system studies, and financial capabilities to assist with the project developments in those fronts. I'm not going to go through the key services that we offer, but we just thought we would leave here this slide so that if anybody wants to take a look after the presentation, you can go through it. And of course, more than happy to assist any people in the audience that might have any needs in their projects or developments. Worthwhile mentioning that we do help governments and utilities. We are also working a lot with equity investors and developers, owners of projects, and we also have a very big portfolio of work or projects that we have been involved assisting lending institutions and banks. When it comes to our experience in renewable energies, or more solar and wind, because it's the focus of this presentation, we have already worked on over 12 gigawatts of solar projects and 70 gigawatts of wind projects worldwide. We present in this slide the figures for Africa. As you can see, we are very, very active in African emerging market, and this is spread out in a number of projects across different locations. Again, we here are just selecting a number of the projects. We tried to do it in such a manner that we would show some of our experience in different countries and across different types of assignments as technical advisors, lenders, technical advisors, or owners, engineers. But our full capability statement is available upon request for anybody in the audience that would like to take a view. And this being said, I will give the mic to Mark, who will continue with the overview of the existing IPP programs and initiatives.
Thanks for that, Javier. Before we go into the detail of country-specific information, we thought it would be good to give an overview of the different programs that we see throughout the continent. In governments, we typically see three broad programs, being either competitive bidding, feed-in tariffs, or unsolicited bids. Under the competitive bidding, obviously each one of them has certain advantages and disadvantages, but the competitive bidding is similar to the South African REAP program, as well as scaling solar, which we have seen in Zambia recently. It encourages competitive price bidding. This obviously has a certain risk associated with it, and governments need to ensure that projects remain viable at tariffs that are bid. The key aspect here is that they aim to provide a competitive PPA and, more importantly, bankable. FIT programs, it's been successfully implemented with the Get Fit, where we saw in Uganda and Zambia. It requires accurate costing and tariffs, and then we've seen it more commonly used with smaller projects. The unsolicited bids, it offers the opportunity for governments to procure multiple projects on a concurrent basis. However, it can have reduced visibility and is also less regulated. We are seeing the emergence of quite a few private PPAs being negotiated. The key issue that's often present here is bankability, as well on the PPA basis and the term of PPA. So it's key that the off-taker is able to provide some surety to ensure lender comfort. Key considerations through these various styles of IPP programs. In some cases, sites are pre-selected versus a developer's proposition. This obviously has a key impact from a geographical location in terms of resource, as well as the specific topography, whether or not it's suitable for the application of the technology that's going to be implemented. One other consideration is interconnection costs, whether the utility or government is going to be covering this, whether there's any subsidies, local content. All of these are key topics that need to be considered when evaluating entering a specific market. In terms of the approaches throughout Africa, we've seen an evolution over the past few years. In quite a few instances, countries have initiated with a FIT program, including South Africa, and have evolved, as well as in Namibia, through to an auction process. Some, such as Kenya, Senegal, and Zambia, are seeing a transition through to an auction process, and others, such as Ghana, have an auction as well as a FIT in continuation. So yeah, that's sort of the keys that we're seeing in terms of progress throughout the various countries. If we have a look here, we just wanted to make a note that we found this from the Global Construction Review website, so some of it might be slightly outdated, but it does provide a good overview of activities that are happening throughout the continent. In terms of the colors, the yellow areas, which are obviously more bright on the screen, show the areas where there is a lot of grid infrastructure in place, going down to the darker colors and black areas where there is very limited grid infrastructure, and there is a need for a significant increase in infrastructure to allow for increased penetration of wind and solar technologies. In terms of the tariff reduction, we've seen Africa produce some of the lowest tariffs globally. The solar PV and CSP images there show tariff decreases, while the wind is the decrease in capex since 1983. I think that most of us are, being quite close to industry, understand that as the technology is advancing and becoming increasing its capacities, we are able to offer more competitive tariffs, and I think it holds well for Africa and renewables going forward.
Thanks, Mark. So we will now go and speak a little bit about the solar and wind markets in the continent. These are some of the countries that we have selected to present in these slides. As I said, there will be other countries that are not represented, but that might have also ongoing projects or potential. I think that before I jump onto the next slides, the message from the previous slides is that Africa in general has a lot of potential for renewable energies and for growth of demand and power. So we see that with the prices of renewables that are being presented internationally and in Africa, we believe that renewables has a lot to say going forward in the continent. The first country that we are going to talk about is Ethiopia. Ethiopia, it's a very interesting country because since 2005 has had a double-digit economic growth, so it is one of the fastest growing economies in the continent. However, its installed capacity is quite low, and it's mostly hydro projects. With a power demand growth of around 30% a year, we believe that this is a market with a huge potential for new projects. Of course, a lot of them might come from hydro, but it has been identified that renewable energy potential in the country could be up to 60 gigawatts, and at the moment the Minister of Water, Irrigation and Electricity has a policy to encourage renewable projects, and the target that the government has would be around 35 gigawatts by 2037. This being said, there is only a couple of projects when it comes to wind and solar that have been operational for some time. The Ashegora wind farm and the Adama wind farm, which are reflected in the map, in their locations. But what we are seeing is that there is a very, very encouraging future for Ethiopia. At the moment, when it comes to solar, there is a couple of initiatives on the table. The government, through the Ethiopian Electric Power Company, issued RFPs for 300 megawatt PV projects. The first one was the Sub-Sahara project, which it's still ongoing, and it's under a competitive bidding process. And recently they have also announced the Humera and Mekele projects. We are actually involved in these processes, supporting one of the bidders. It is a well-structured program, of course, with its particularities and considerations. But we are happy to see that the government has already started with the procurement process of PV projects, of large-scale PV projects. In parallel to this, the IFC scaling solar has already been announced in the country. For now, it will be around, or up to 500 megawatts that will be developed under the initiative. It is not yet clear how the phases are going to work, or what is going to be the criteria, although we can expect very similar structure to that we have seen in Zambia and in Senegal, where the programs are also ongoing. There is no major plans at the moment to implement CSP that we have heard of, but of course there is potential for this with the solar resource that there is in the country.
Onto the wind aspects, we do take note that Ethiopia holds great capability to increase its currently installed wind capacity, which sits at around 300 megawatts. There's several unsolicited direct negotiations with government, and the Ethiopian master plan of 2013 currently recommends that up to 900 megawatts of wind be installed. If we move on to Ghana, which is another very interesting West African country that we've seen a lot of activity recently. There's an installed capacity in the country of 4 gigawatts with a population of 27 million people. They have a target to increase renewable sources by 10% by 2020, and this includes on-grid, mini-grid, as well as off-grid applications. They currently, in 2011, they established a feed-in tariff, which has largely not been successful, and this included purchase obligations for distribution utilities and bulk consumers. There is also net metering for distributed generation, and applications such as rooftop. We are seeing some increase in project development taking use of net metering. There are currently 2 solar projects which are in operation, which is the Goma 20 megawatt project in the south and the Novongo 2 megawatt project in the north. We also have the Atapa wind farm of 225 megawatts, which is advancing to financial close, which is outside of Accra.
Indeed, Ghana is a very interesting market, Mark. There were 71 licenses that were awarded actually under the refit program between 2013 and 2015. Interestingly so, there is not much update, unless publicly available, from 2015. Most of these licenses have actually expired, or were due to expire between 2014 and 2016. So, as you said, it's not been Well, the structure is there, and ECG has supported some of these licenses, and the government as well. It's actually interesting that many of these would have expired by now, and there is only a couple of projects that have actually been built under this license scheme, under the REFIT program. In parallel to this, though, the government also issued a tender for a 20 megawatt PV project. There was 39 bidders that participated. 18 were shortlisted, and Biotherm announced at the end of last year that they had been awarded with the project. We are not 100% sure how the process is going at the moment. We believe it will most likely be also on the way to financial close, as the Ajitepa wind farm that you mentioned earlier. Another interesting prospect for Ghana is the net metering system for rooftops in malls and big buildings. There is indeed a platform that would allow for net metering and subsidies from the government per installation, and the goal that they have is installing up to 200 megawatts in this form. You have at the bottom right a table with the latest update of the feed-in tariffs, which is from 2016, interestingly, despite what I have said that we haven't been able to find information more recent than 2015 on the licenses that have been awarded. And then at the top right of this slide, coming directly from the Ministry of Power in November 2016 from a presentation that they delivered, it's the potential targets that they would have for 2030 for solar and wind. Again, it's not a huge market, but we see a lot of activity going in the country, and we believe that there will be a number of projects going ahead in Ghana. We move on to Kenya, which is another very interesting market. Kenya has a population of around 45 million people, and however, energy installed generation capacity of around 2.3 gigawatts, which would be on the lower side for the size of a population. They had plans in 2013 to add 5,000 megawatts by the end of 2017, although looking at the ratios of installed capacity in the last couple of years, it appears unlikely that this will be achieved. Nevertheless, the government has come back, understood this, and sort of like replaced this target by a more aggressive target for 2030 of around, there is a little bit of controversy in the numbers. We have gone with the conservative 18 gigawatts. Other sources would suggest 21 gigawatts, but of a substantial amount of new energy being installed towards 2030. Up to now, there is a number of small solar projects which are beyond the scope of this presentation, so we haven't listed them. But there is also one big wind farm that I'm sure that a lot of people in the audience are familiar with, as it has won a number of awards, and it's one of the largest project finance infrastructure projects in East Africa. It's the Lake Turkana wind project, which is at the moment under construction and expected to be commissioned probably in 2018. We are actually involved quite actively in this project from the very early stages as well. As we said, there is a feed-in tariff in place that has been going since 2008, and it has actually had a couple of updates, the last one being from 2012. You can see the capacities and tariffs on the top right corner of this slide. However, it's interesting that none of the projects that have been developed under this feed-in tariff have actually managed to secure the PPA and achieve financial close and actually go into the construction phase. We understand that there is around 50 projects that have sort of like been publicly announced or engaged in discussions for this feed-in tariff. There is a number of them that actually are quite advanced according to the discussions that we have had with some of the developers, and we hope that some of these will be going ahead. In parallel, the government has, though, started a process to assess whether an auction process would be more beneficial for them. As we said in one of the earlier slides that Mark presented, we have seen maybe a trend towards auction processes in several countries in Africa after the success of the REIPP program or scaling solar. And this is something that Kenya is exploring at the moment. And just to close the loop for solar, there is no major plans at the moment for CSP that we are aware of. However, there is focus from the government and some of the utilities and stakeholders in the country to develop mini-grid systems and hybrid projects in some locations, as well as solar home systems. Again, it's beyond the remit of this presentation, so we won't expand on that front.
Super. From the wind side, there are many projects that are currently under development and in advanced PPA negotiations. However, certain aspects such as land, and in the specific case of Kinancorp, we can see how it can actually be fatal to the project execution, and the land aspect is also causing waves in other areas of Kenya and projects. There's a target of 500 megawatts by 2017, which with Lake Turkana at 320 megawatts and a few other projects potentially coming online and under construction is more than likely to be achieved, and increasing then to 1,000 megawatts by 2022 and 3 gigs by 2030. This also goes in, and as Javi mentioned, with an updated outlook that these numbers may be revised. And finally, just to close off, obviously on the Lake Turkana, which has been mentioned, and the construction is going all to plan. The project is currently waiting for the grid line to be completed to actually connect the facility to start early generation into the network.
Great. Very interestingly so, something else to mention is that Mott MacDonald is assisting at the moment the Kenyan government on the process to assess the potential for a competitive bidding initiative being put in place in the country. And this connects with the next country, which is Malawi, where again Mott MacDonald was assisting the Malawian government to develop the framework and the grid plans to facilitate the interconnection of renewable energy projects. Malawi, it's a country with around 351 megawatts of installed capacity in one hydro project. They are at the moment looking at diversifying the portfolio. Very small percentage of the population has access to electricity, and actually quite a big percentage are in rural areas that don't have a grid active in the country. There has been a number of initiatives or unsolicited bids that the government has received, and unilateral discussions between different stakeholders. And more recently, we have seen ESCOM publishing ESCOM is the in-country utility, and they have published an RFP for a number of PV projects on the range of 15 to 40 megawatts. The bid submission date, if there is no delays, which might take place as we have seen in other countries in the region, would be January 2017. And we are very curious to see which developers are participating in this process and what comes out of it. In parallel to that, and not mentioned in this slide, there is also a number of initiatives again for in order to bring electricity to these people in the rural communities for mini grid systems and hybrid systems. And we understand that Power Africa is quite active in that front in the country. Mark, you can comment a little bit on the wind.
Yeah, super. So on the wind side, we are seeing a slight pickup in Malawi. Given the low installed capacity, it is obviously limited, but there are most definitely certain regions within the country that have a viable wind resource, Mott MacDonald has recently been involved in a grid study, and we have seen the installation of several metmasts over the last 18 months or so. So it'll be a country to watch, and hopefully there'll be a few projects coming up in the next few years. Moving on to Namibia. It's an interesting country for both wind and solar with excellent resource. It has an installed capacity of 500 megawatts and notably also imports 60% of power from the Southern African power pool, giving it quite a big deficit. The main source of power is currently 330 megawatts of hydro and has a population of 2.3 million. The government's draft policy is to increase renewable energy and to become energy independent by 2030. In terms of the current status, there is currently no single buyer market model, and NamPower, through a trading license, is the single buyer. In terms of the wind outlook in Namibia, wind definitely has the potential to become a major component, and we see through, if you have a look in the, we unfortunately don't have a map here, but along the coastal regions as well as certain inland, there's a very high wind resource. There are quite a few projects that are under development and in PPA negotiations, one of them being probably the most advanced is the Dia's 44 megawatt wind project, where Mott MacDonald is quite extensively involved. And then on to the solar aspects, I'll hand over to Javier.
Thanks, Mark. There is a little bit more of movement in the solar front. Well, rather than movement, some more concrete things on the table. There was 14 PPAs that have been awarded under the REFIT program for 5 megawatt projects. Most of these projects, well, a number of them are still in development, but there is also a few that have already started construction, and I believe that there is 3 or 4 that have even reached commercial operation. So this is a very important milestone for Namibia to diversify and get involved in renewables and get a feeling on what solar can contribute to the grid. NamPower has already launched a RFP for a 37 megawatt project. This is located in Marienthal, and we understand that the bids were submitted by the end of last year. Actually, Mott MacDonald was again involved with one of the potential bidders that was running for this project, and we believe that the selection process from NamPower is coming to an end or has already been pre-announced, and the project will hopefully see the light at some point soon and reach financial close in the coming months within this year. In this country, interestingly, and as opposed to other countries that we have spoken so far, there is plans for CSP. NamPower is actually quite eager for CSP as one of the solutions to provide renewable energy to the grid in a stable and dispatchable capacity. Mott MacDonald is again actually busy at the moment advising NamPower through the European Investment Bank on the potential options for CSP in the country. The preliminary investigations and pre-feasibility studies have already taken place, and we hope again that there will be a procurement program being launched by NamPower in the coming months to procure CSP. This being said, as Mark has mentioned before, at the moment NamPower is the main buyer of electricity in the country. However, there is a potential for a opening in the market for other buyers and private off-takers to come in. This would allow for mining companies and other big consumers to procure their own electricity directly from IPPs, and it's again a market to watch going forward. If this happens, it could open a lot of potential doors in a market that, as Mark has mentioned, has a very, very extensive potential in terms of resource for both wind and solar. The next country, you might have seen that in order to not treat one country more importantly than others, what we have done is go through the countries alphabetically. So that's why we are jumping from north to south and south to north. So the next country that we are going to be commenting on is Nigeria. Nigeria has an installed capacity of 12 gigawatts, although very interestingly so, it tends to have an actual generation capacity between 3.5 and 5 gigawatts, with natural gas being the main source. And again, this crashes very much with the size of the population of 174 million people in the country. Nigeria has big plans for expanding their generation through different sources of energy, which it appears that renewables are going to be a substantial part of it. There was a feed-in tariff scheme that was announced in 2018, although not much had been happening for quite some time. It was updated in 2012, and things were still on hold. And only in June last year, there was the 14 first PPAs that were signed. Well, or I'm not sure if all of them have been signed, but at least committed and into final discussions, and some of them already signed, totaling 1,125 gigawatts of solar. We do hope that this is going to open the door for solar and wind to come stronger into Nigeria. There is, again, a lot of potential in the country, and there is not as much happening so far. When it comes to wind, we have indeed seen some project development, although it has been limited, to be honest. And one of the areas, as you can see in the map with the wind resource, that would offer the good wind potential would be around the center right of the country. There is not major plans that we have heard of when it comes to CSP. And it would make sense with the solar resource towards the north, towards the south of the country, where a lot of developments are happening. But there is a lot of potential for mini grids and hybrid projects. Again, it's a country widely populated, and some of this population is in rural communities. And while it is not the remit of this presentation, we cannot ignore at all this market, which we are actually getting more and more involved. Senegal is the next country in focus. Senegal, it's a country with an installed capacity of 660 megawatts, mostly fossil fuels. They have been willing to push for renewable energies for quite some time now. In 2013, the government, through the main utility company, issued 72 generation licenses. And in 2016, they have announced the Scaling Solar initiative in the country to be implemented. Very interestingly, it's not going to be a huge market. I mean, their targets for solar for 2020 and 2030 are around 200 to 300 megawatts, as you can see at the bottom of the slide. But we hope that there will be a number of projects happening. Out of the 72 generation licenses that were issued in 2013, there was actually 9 projects that were selected by Senelec, totaling 180 megawatts to go ahead. And we cannot, although we have some internal insights, we cannot really mention which ones have gone ahead. But there is a number within these 9 that have actually already progressed quite substantially. At least one of them is already in operations, actually, and there is some others that are still likely to go ahead. However, it is a small number from the initial 72 generation licenses that will see the light. In 2016, the government announced Scaling Solar, as we have said. The pre-qualification phase has already taken place. The current target for Scaling Solar is around 200 megawatts. And there is a short list at the moment that I believe it's public of 13 candidates, which will need to prepare their bids and go into the next stage of the procurement process. The country has no plans at the moment that are public, at least for CSP projects. But again, the solar market, hopefully there will be a number of projects happening over there.
Thanks, Javier. I'll relieve you a bit from some of the talking. Onto the wind, there's most definitely a viable wind resource, mostly along the coastal belt on the west of the country. The most advanced project to date is the 158 megawatt Tiber wind project, which is currently proceeding to financial close, and that is being financed with Lekela and OPIC funding. There are a few other wind projects under development, but it is somewhat limited to Tiber as an advanced project at the moment. Moving on to South Africa, which I think for most of us on the call will be a familiar market given its importance on the continent. Either which way, I will give a brief overview to bring everyone up to speed. The country has an installed capacity of around 50 gigawatts, and currently 85% is generated from coal, with 7% from renewables, all being added over the last 4 years through the REIPPP program. There's a population of about 55 million people, and the program, Renewable program, as has been mentioned, has been an award-winning competitive bidding process. And the tariffs have dropped substantially from round 1 through to round 4, of which, if we're looking at the wind and solar tariffs of the most recent round, expected to be around the 60-cent mark, it's driven it down to comparative tariffs considered on a global level. We are seeing a significant increase actually in solar rooftop as well as off-grid markets, and then also some large private PPAs such as Sibanye Gold, the mining company, which recently put out their tender for 50 megawatts, and that was also secured by Biotherm Energy. We can just take a note here of some of the tariff decreases on the PV and wind reduction at the top, as has been mentioned. And I will just hand over to Javi to touch on the CSP aspects here.
Sure. So it's very interesting to comment on the reduction indeed of PV and wind, which particularly for PV, as you can see in the top figure, it has been drastic. The prices have dropped massively as the rounds have been going. When it comes to CSP, it's a little bit more difficult to make a comparison. The prices have actually also dropped considerably, and this is very much affected by the time of the day tariff. So there is a split, or there is a different price that the energy generated during the late hours of the day gets paid for by Eskom, and this makes it a little bit more difficult to compare the tariffs across the different rounds. But the message is again very similar. The tariffs have kept dropping in CSP as well, and we are very curious to see actually the results of the last round. Hopefully at some point soon it will be announced. There has been already significant delays in that front, but the last round has been the one with more competition when it has come to CSP, with a very large number of projects being bidding for an overall capacity of 450 megawatts, and we believe that the prices announced will definitely show a lot of progression in that front.
Onto the South African future outlook, there's currently no mandated CSP beyond 2020. We'll see whether that gets revised with the RP as we progress. There's nearly double the amount of wind compared to PV, which is currently promulgated. And we're also seeing private companies increasing the demand for either self-build or PPA basis as the cost of electricity is increasing. Some of the challenges include wheeling still has a lot of red tape, and we're trying to, government's trying to resolve that, as well as keeping a steady progress on the REIPP program. The current delays that we are experiencing create a lot of investor and utility uncertainty, and especially when we're looking at establishing aspects such as local content, it doesn't bode well with the industry when such extensive delays are being experienced. Moving on to Tanzania, again, the country has a lot of wind and solar potential. We see a lot of the wind options coming in the center of the country. There's an installed capacity of 1.6 gigawatts, and the current composition of generation is 35% hydro, 34% gas, and 31% diesel, with a population of 50.7 million people. This was one of the pilot countries which was selected to benefit from the Scaling Up Renewable Energy Program, and IPP penetration is increasing steadily, but still has a lot of room to grow going forward. From the wind aspect, we have seen a lot of wind resource assessments and masts being installed across the country, which is increasing the certainty in the wind resource. Given the number of projects under development, we definitely think that Tanzania will be an emerging market once some PPA issues are resolved going forward. On the solar front, Tanzania has high levels of solar energy, and are especially good in the central area of the country, as has been mentioned. And both solar PV and CSP are currently in development. Further, on top of that, there are unsolicited negotiations going on directly with government.
Just clarifying one point on that. Most of the solar PV and solar thermal, rather than CSP projects that we have seen in the country, are in the smaller size, even quite a bit for hybrid systems and off-grid systems. We actually developed a few years ago, we participated in a study from the Millennium Challenge Corporation on how to how to secure access to electricity in rural communities, whether expanding the grid or using solar. And there is a lot of development in that from in Tanzania. Solar would make a lot of sense due to the remote locations where the population it's in hubs. Zambia is the last country that, as such, we will focus on in this presentation. Zambia, it's a country with an installed capacity of 2.4 gigawatts, mostly hydro, and a population of 15 million people. There is a number of initiatives that have been going, at least in the solar front. The Get Fit program was announced quite a while ago, with KfW pushing quite hard for projects on the range of 5 megawatts. Eventually, due to different considerations, these projects have not really happened, although we believe, based on recent discussions, that the initiative is still ongoing and it's being reassessed, and most likely there might be projects happening under this initiative in the coming months or years. In parallel, the government has engaged with IFC to launch the Scaling Solar Initiative. Round 1 took place last year, and I'm sure that a lot of the people in the audience are familiar with it. There was a lot of PR done around this program, and the result was that some of the lowest tariffs in Sub-Saharan Africa were offered by the 2 successful bidders, Enel and Neoen with First Solar. And it must be said, though, that in case that there is any decision makers on the presentation, it's very important to assess some of the conditions that Mark was mentioning at the very early stages of the presentation, in terms of subsidies for development, pre-selected sites, tax reliefs, and all of these sort of things, because it was quite extensively so already pre-selected the site, and there was some subsidies and whatnot. So it's a very interesting country. The round 2 is coming soon for the Scaling Solar program, and we hope to see again another number of projects coming again at very competitive prices. In parallel to this, we are aware that there is one-on-one discussions between the developer and some developers and the government, and we will also see where what that brings the development of projects. And there is some wind farms that are being developed in the country, possibly under this scheme of one-on-one discussions, and there is not major plans for CSP. So yeah, that's the summary for Zambia. And then we are just going to conclude our presentation by stating that Africa has a very, very extensive renewable energy potential across the entire continent. As we have said before, there is a number of markets that we haven't focused on during this presentation. Nevertheless, there is a number of projects across different locations. A lot of them come to mind in solar. I'm sure that for Mark, many of these come also to mind in wind. And so we apologize for some of the countries that didn't make it to the presentation due to the time constraint. But we hope that this has given you an overall good overview of what is happening in the continent, and we remain at your disposal in case that there is any questions that any people from the audience has. We thank you very, very much for attending the webinar. We thank very much the organizers. We believe that we have gone a little bit beyond the initial time, so we apologize for that. It's very easy to get engaged in this very interesting market, which we love very much.
Thank you very much for attending, everyone. We'll hand back over to the organizer.
Okay, thanks Javier and Mark for a fantastic presentation. That was very insightful, and as you said, we have very little time now. I just want to say that to everybody, you'll have access to the full audio replay and presentations after the webinar. I'll probably send them to you in a couple of days. So please share those around with your colleagues and clients and within the renewables community. Today's topic was one of many discussions that will be addressed at the Africa New Energy 2017 conference in Cape Town. That's on March the 7th and the 8th, so do come along and join us. We have hundreds of delegates already confirmed and support from our speakers and sponsors such as Enercon, Rio Glass, CSDR, South Africa Insurance Association, TUV Nord, Solar Buyer, Dewey Renewable Energies, and to name a few. So it's Africa's premier meeting point for wind and solar professionals, so do join us. Again, we'll send the recordings to you after a couple of days. Javier, I'm not sure, have you received the questions, or would you like me to read those out to you? I think we probably have time for a few questions.
Sorry, we were actually looking in the chat, thinking that there was no questions. We were quite surprised. I am now opening the questions.
Just give us a moment, we're just busy getting through it.
Right, there is a number of them.
Perhaps pick a couple of questions because we have about 4 minutes.
So, well, there is a question that I'm just taking the first one while we assess others, which is from one person in the audience asking how will ESCOM refusal to sign the PPAs impact renewables? And of course, this is a wide debate at the moment in South Africa, in the country. Most stakeholders in the industry that are very, very active in South Africa are very much aware of ESCOM's opposition or reluctance to sign some of the PPAs, and also the stand of the DOE and the IPP office. We believe that, or we hope that this situation will soon be addressed, and the country will continue with their prospects, as Mark has commented on the IRP, to install much more renewables going forward. but yeah, of course this needs to be resolved. Otherwise, if Eskom doesn't sign, there is no more renewables unless it's under private PPAs.
Okay, moving on to one of the next questions, which is, are the high FIT tariffs in Ghana justified, given that we are seeing much lower tariffs in other African countries? I think one of the things that needs to be considered here is also locality. For example, Ghana and West Africa, especially on the coastal areas, there may have a significantly lower resource, and in order to attract investment, they may actually increase the FIT tariffs to actually justify developers coming and implementing private power. So, yes, they are higher, but like we say, is that in order to actually attract that, it does need to be taken into consideration.
Right. I don't know, Adam, do we have time for one more question? There is an interesting one on CSP that I'm...
One more.
So there is a question on...
Yeah.
It's a question on CSP, on why there is not as much interest in CSP as there might be in wind and solar in some of the Central African countries, and also whether CSP, both for desalination or electricity production, should be considered in countries with potential drought problems or that are quite dry. That's a very interesting question. A lot of it has to do with the solar resource in some of the countries, which is different when we are assessing it for CSP than for PV. For PV, it would be the global horizontal irradiation or the in-plane with the modest horizontal irradiation, whereas for CSP, it's the direct irradiation, direct normal irradiation that we should be looking at. And so the resource is not necessarily always good for CSP when it is good for PV. But there is also the perception that CSP is more expensive than PV. And it is indeed when you look at the prices of electricity on an LCOE basis or the tariffs that are being offered. However, there is markets like Namibia, for instance, that the dispatchability or the stability that it allows for the grid operators, it's actually put into the equation, and there is a lot of information from Sastella, Protermosolar, and other CSP associations on the benefits that this has for the market. So we hope that other markets, as they progress, they also assess CSP as a good solution. There is systems, and we have seen them in Dubai. We have seen them in South Africa. Actually, the Kakshu project, which is the first CSP project in operation in Sub-Saharan Africa, has an air cooling condenser. So it's a dry condenser system, which reduces the amount of water requirements significantly for CSP projects, and this is a very good solution for locations with constraint from a water perspective.
Okay, Javier, thank you very much for that final question, and thanks again for a very, very excellent presentation. The webinar is just about to end, so thank you very much, guys.
Thanks very much to everybody, including the organizers, and of course, if there is any other questions from the audience, you have our emails from Mark and myself. Please feel free to send us an email, and if there is any prospects for work, we are also happy to receive emails. Thanks very much.
Thank you to everyone for attending.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Javier. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
And Mark, that is. Bye.